former Republican operative looks at the current state of the party from her perch in exile. That's coming up. Hello and welcome to Church in Maine, a podcast for people interested in the intersection of faith, politics, and culture. I'm Dennis Sanders, your host. In this episode, I'm talking with a former Republican operative who's looking at the current state of the GOP and wonders if her past work might have had a role in the rise of Donald Trump. Gretchen Purser describes herself the following way. I'm a wife, mom of 3 wonderful humans, and a person of deep and ever-evolving faith. I'm a recovering evangelical, former political hack, and a Republican refugee. I built a 20-year career working for national Republican campaigns, candidates, and committees, and their adorable baby brother, the religious right. And while Gretchen had that 20-year career as a GOP operative, she is reflective in looking at this from the outside and wondering what's happened to her party. This is a great conversation that was recorded on Ash Wednesday, and it's as much about the role of God's grace as it is about politics. It's about grace for people who might have voted for Trump, especially those who are now disaffected Trump supporters, and about grace for herself. Gretchen is the host of her own podcast, which is called The Mess Is Mine, and I will put that link in the show notes. So for now, please listen in to this conversation that I had with Gretchen Purser. Okay, Gretchen, thank you for joining us here today. I wanted to actually just start off just to kind of get your faith background, kind of where you grew up, what was that like, and kind of leading up to today.
Sure. Thank you. First of all, thanks for having me, Dennis. I appreciate the opportunity. I grew up in a small town, in an evangelical town in an evangelical state. In an evangelical decade. I grew up in small town Oklahoma outside of Tulsa.
Okay.
About, 15,000 people and about 29 churches. My grandfather was a pastor in an evangelical church. So it was I describe it as it's non-denominational evangelical. It was a Christian church, but it was non-denominational, not part of Church of Christ. Mm-hmm. So it's confusing, but I explain to people it's about 2 clicks to the right of the Baptists. Not quite as conservative as maybe like the Nazarene or the Church of Christ folks that didn't listen to music, but someplace along those lines. Like I described to my Methodist husband when he first met me, and he was like, "So are we gonna see snakes?" I'm like, "We're just like one exit short of snakes." So anyway, that was my upbringing. So if we weren't in my grandfather's church, we were in our church Sunday. Well, if it was open Monday, we'd be there. But Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, my whole life. So,
okay.
Very, very conservative. Very conservative. So, that's sort of the background that I brought. I was interested in journalism, but decided to take an internship in Washington the summer before my senior year of college.
Okay.
And when I got here, like all bets were off. I'm like, this is it. This is what I want to do. So I got the opportunity to work for a great, wonderful, good man, one of the good Republicans. His name was Don Nichols out of Oklahoma. He was a senator for a long time. I had the great honor to work for him and with him for a long, long time. I met my husband in his office. Some of my best friends of life are from that office. And he happened to be chairman of the campaign committee as I was graduating from college. So it was kind of like, do you want to do policy or do you want to do campaigns? And I was thinking, I kind of veered toward campaigns. I liked the energy of it. The idea of writing constituent letters about bridges didn't really turn me on. So I thought, okay, I'm going to go over to the campaign committee. And when I went that route, I kind of stayed that route. I ended up doing Senate fundraising. Then I ended up having my own company and doing this thing called the President's Dinner, which was and then I ended up working for the Christian Coalition, raising a bunch of money for Ralph and Pat and all those guys. And then I came back and finished out my official career at the Republican National Committee, doing a bunch of galas and doing things for George Bush and John McCain and all that crowd. So I did a bunch of presidential events. I did a bunch of fundraising for him. And so I spent my whole career, 20 plus years, raising money for the Republican Party. And it was a really natural pathway from, my very conservative, although, the Republicans, obviously, that I worked for then are nothing like the Republicans that you see today. And I always have to put that disclaimer in for people like my children who really know the Republican Party under the cloud of Donald Trump. It's a very different deal. So that's sort of a long answer to a short question of how I view all this, the lens that I see politics and religion today.
So we're recording this actually the day after the President Trump's address to Congress.
Mm-hmm.
And, I kind of want to ask about your thoughts about that, but I also do want to kind of talk about where do you see the difference in the Republican Party of 2025 as opposed to, say, 2005? Because I think for people who are, and I have a lot of friends who are far more progressive, liberal than I am, think that the Republicans have always been like this. And I've kind of been more on the outside of GOP things here in Minnesota, and know that's not been the case, that there have been differences. How would you, to help people understand the big difference between what you've seen now, observed now, and what you saw growing, as a younger person in the 90s and aughts?
Well, I will preface this by saying I really didn't want to watch last night, and I watched it because I knew I was talking to you today. So I probably need to be well versed. I would have watched it anyway. I would have caved. But that is a very good question and has multifaceted answers. Number one, if you might recall, we cared about character. Character was real important to the Republican Party back then. We ran races on it. The whole notion was character counts. We were so outraged by what Bill Clinton, the scandal that he had in the White House. We were just outraged at that. And I remember people being so upset that he would go into the White House on a Saturday and not have a coat and tie on, because that was the precedent that had been set, was the respect for the office. And so Bill Clinton sort of set the tone for us to get on our high horse about character. And I believe, a lot of people have a lot of problems with George W. Bush and things that he did and mistakes that he made. And he would and does admit to some of that. But that wasn't a mistake of intent. It was a mistake of misinformation, not understanding a situation, not having the full picture. And we got into a war that is regrettable in a lot of ways. But I think also part of that with him was his character was, it was solid. I would say irreproachable, but it's not. No one's is. But he was a good man with a good heart who cared about people, who cared about the country. And I didn't doubt his motives. I didn't doubt his motives. I didn't really doubt Clinton's motives on the national scale or Obama's. We've been fortunate in this country to have a lot of presidents that even if we disagree with their methods, we didn't necessarily question their motives. But you can start with character. You can move straight from that to foreign policy, and the importance to strengthen our allies and stand by our allies. And gosh, God knows we needed those allies. And, after 9/11, they were with us. And they were with us because we had been with them. We have spent decades building these relationships with our allies and being very leery of dictators and people who want to encroach on other people's sovereign lands, which is what's happening in Ukraine with Putin. And while people keep drawing these comparisons, with Trump, Bill Clinton and George Bush both tried to work with Putin. Yes, they both tried to work with Putin. They tried, but they didn't trust Putin and they didn't take Putin's side. And if we recall going back to the Reagan days, it was trust but verify. And that was always the relationship that we had with Russia, was trust but verify. And you don't really trust, but you want to work with them and you want to keep the peace. Keeping the peace doesn't mean rolling over and handing over democracies that, by the way, we talked into giving away their nuclear arms because they could trust us. And now we're turning our backs on them. So any self-respecting Republican on the planet, whether they are a Trump person or not a Trump person, should be nauseous at what's happening between Russia and Ukraine. There is nothing conservative about this. It's terrifying and it's nauseating, and it's probably the number one thing you could say that's different from what the Republican Party of yesteryear is, and something that has made he has turned a corner for the Republican Party that I'm not sure they're ever going to turn back to. If you watch J.D. Vance and his sycophant nodding last night, everything they said, if you watch J.D. Vance in the Oval Office and the way he treated Zelensky, I think it's pretty clear that this Republican Party is no longer on the side of the democracies versus the dictators. Another thing is smaller government. We really wanted government to be smaller. And a lot of people out there might think, yeah, that's exactly what I want. That's what Doge is doing. It's not, everything from the overreach in this administration and the expansion of presidential powers that is in direct conflict with the Constitution is troubling. That's not smaller government. And taking more power away from Congress and giving it to the president is not smaller government. And even to the point of, a lot of the Supreme Court decisions, the expansion of presidential powers, all of that is something that the Republican Party never really wanted. And the thing that I struggle with is I keep reminding my conservative friends, I'm like, actually they're not my Trumpy friends, because I'm not going to call them conservatives, because in my view of conservatism, they're really not conservatives. And they're not even libertarians. They're just Trumpists. It's just whatever he wants is what they want. Which leads me to the last point, which is this whole anti-intellectual bias that we have, which is, the Republicans never used to be that way. It didn't used to be, oh, well, if you're educated, then you're on the wrong side. If you've been to college, then, screw you. We don't care. We need all the people. We need all the people who went to all the schools, and we need to all come together and just this segmenting of people and sectioning them off. And really just purely discounting entire populations of the country. The demeaning of, George Bush was a Christian man. Bill Clinton, flawed, but a Christian man. They would never disparage their other human beings by debasing them and talking about people like they weren't human. That is straight from the autocrat playbook. And that's what Donald Trump has done forever. He, instead of calling us to be our better angels, he's taking us, just basing everything on our most base, Lord of the Flies instincts. And that is, it's heartbreaking for me because he doesn't just make the Republicans look bad. He makes the Christians look bad to me. I feel like the Republican Party and the Christians aren't doing each other any favors. They're both losing the fight for one another. Christians have a harder time, witnessing for Christ when they behave this way and they're seen as an arm of the Republican Party. And Republicans have a hard time, winning anyone over when it just seems like they're just spewing a bunch of hypocritical nonsense that's clearly not playing out in their policy. You can't be a follower of Christ and claim to be the Christian party and then debase human beings all day long and say that you don't care what happens to Ukraine and call people every name under the book, depending on where they fall, whether they're a person of color or of their sexual preference or whatever it is, what region, entire regions of the country and regions of the world. That's not what Christ called us to do. So that should go without saying, but it seems like it doesn't. And so when you look at the difference between now and then, I mean, I'm sure you're sad you asked this question, Dennis. I could talk for 5 hours on the differences between the old Republican Party and whatever this is now, it's just a mystery to me.
Yeah, one of the things, having seen some of the video from the meeting with President Zelensky of Ukraine, and I've seen this and I've kind of stitched it through different events that have happened over the last month and a half, which feels like 5 years, is that it seems like the ethic, if you want to call it that seems to be so very salient in this administration is domination. Mm-hmm. That it's looking at others as people that can be dominated. And so whether it's President Zelensky or federal workers or, immigrants or foreign aid or whatever, it's this sense of I'm the powerful one and I'm going to just kind of run all over you and show my power. It's kind of like what someone else has talked about. A few people have talked about. I think Jonah Goldberg has talked about it too, as barbarians. Mm-hmm. And that's what it feels like.
Mm-hmm. It does. I mean, we have gone from being, they've got this notion that might makes right and the ends justify the means. And, and I can do a whole mea culpa on my decades of believing that the ends justified the means, not seeing where the ends were going. Mm-hmm. I think, and I particularly put that in my work with the Christian Coalition, and the othering that we really mastered and really wrapped around the axle of the Republican Party. We tied those two so closely together that now you have pastors, preaching politics from the pulpit every single month, every single week. And that was what we thought we wanted until, you see that play out in real time. But yeah, we've gone from being America's or the world's big brother, the good guy big, strong, big brother who's going to protect us from bad things, to like being the schoolyard bully who, is going to beat you up unless you give him your milk money. I mean, that's who we are now. It's horrible to watch us not be the good guys anymore. But right now in this snapshot, and I'm not trying to make a huge statement, but in this snapshot of time after that scene in the Oval Office with Zelensky, I don't feel like we're the good guys right now. It feels like we're on the wrong side of history, and that history is going to judge this period very, very harshly. And the rest of the world is bearing witness to it in real time and live. And the president thinks it makes good TV. That's his response. So,
well, it's kind of the other thing that I thought about that whole event was that right now, after that, anything is possible. And when I said that, I meant that's not in a good way. I mean, that anything can happen now, that there isn't a sense of we'll go this and no farther. We have these values that we want to uphold. Mm-mm. I think that's all off the table.
There are no guiding principles here. That's what I was coming back to with the party. There are no guiding principles. In fact, the platform for the Republican Party, used to have all these things in it. And starting in, I guess, 16, the platform, in 20, after 16. In 20, the platform literally, they didn't write a platform because it was just whatever Trump wants is our platform. And then they got hit on that so hard that in 24, they had a platform, but it was, again, whatever Trump wants is in the platform's in the platform. We're just trying to placate people. But there used to be an actual platform committee where they would get together and they would debate issues, and they'd say, where are we on the life issue? Where are we on this issue and this issue? And Don Nichols was chairman of that one year. You'd hash it out with the committeemen, and they would all decide what the platform was, what this party stood for, what the guiding principles were, so that you knew sort of what each side stood for. This side's for smaller government and deregulation and smaller taxes. This side is maybe for expanded human rights, maybe taking better care of poor people. They both had admirable qualities. And ideally, you put them both together. You mix it all up in the soup and you come out someplace in the middle. And that's how we've always been able to do it. Now, the Republican Party has no guiding principles whatsoever. It's whatever Donald Trump wants for whatever reasons he wants in whatever method he wants. And that should give everyone pause. And what I was going to say, but derailed myself earlier, was they're clearly not students of history or understanding the way this stuff works, because whatever is good for the goose is good for the gander. If you expand presidential powers for Donald Trump, guess what? When you get voted out of here in 2 years or 4 years, 4 years, I guess, for the president, 2 years for the House and Senate. But if you do that, then the next person who comes in, let's say it's the most liberal person you can even imagine, that person has expanded presidential power. So what if they do the thing that you hate the very most in the exact same way? We're debasing the entire, he's not just removing the guardrails and he's taking the wheels off the bus. We don't have a system anymore. If once we break all these norms, it's going to take so much discipline by the other party to put it back together in a respectful way. Now, I will say that I do, last night aside, I mean, the little paddles were kind of silly, and the man yelling with the cane. I would have preferred they not do that, just the way I would have preferred that Lauren Boebert and Marjorie Taylor Greene not stand up and scream at Joe Biden. I feel like it diminishes the entire process. I would have preferred they not do that, but the system we have to have some degree of normalcy. And I think the Democrats have done a better job of exercising restraint with regard to a lot of this stuff. There were a lot of things that Joe Biden could have done that he didn't do, obviously. And he also paid attention to the courts, and he paid attention to Congress, and he tried to do things the right way. And yes, he had presidential executive powers, executive orders. And yes, he exercised some pardons at the end that I didn't love, mostly because he said he wasn't going to do it. That was my biggest problem with the pardons, was he said he wouldn't. And, then it just adds to the othering. It's the problem that the Democrats have now is because they did just enough things to come off, to get taken off their high horse. They lost their high ground with regard to honesty about certain things and with regard to transparency about certain things. So now it takes your average Joe voter and they're like, well, they're all crooks and they're all liars and they're all bad and it's all broken. And yeah, Trump's a pig, but the Democrats are just as bad or worse. And that's actually not true. Like, we've never seen anybody as bad as Donald Trump, and we've never seen a Congress allow somebody to be that bad. I mean, the last time we saw somebody this bad in his true nature was probably Richard Nixon, and his own party reined him in and said, look, you're going to get voted out if you don't resign. And so he did. This party had 91 counts to use. Before that, he was impeached twice. Then he had 91 criminal counts, and they couldn't even vote him out. They couldn't even vote for impeachment. They couldn't even bring themselves to do that, even though they knew he was guilty, even though he had just tried to overthrow the stinking government. So this Republican Congress has no courage, and they have no backbone. And I guess they don't have any guiding principles anymore, which is hard to say because I know a lot of these senators and I know that they're good people, and I know they are. It's just, they feel like every time somebody sticks their head out of the hole, their head gets shot off. And they all look at Liz Cheney, who is a picture in courage, who is still my hero for doing what she did. And they're like, if we all get Liz Cheney'd, then what are you going to do? They're going to replace me with somebody that's 10 times worse than I am. But the flip side of that is, if nobody stands up, then this is what happens. So I don't know. You're right insofar as there's absolutely no telling what comes next. And that, I don't know that we've been in this position in a long time in this country, to be in this much uncertainty, not just economic, but just day-to-day uncertainty.
I have a question just to ask about evangelicalism, but before I get to that, one question that I have is, why do you think that Republicans, both elected and voters, have such slavish devotion to Trump? That I don't understand because, you know, I understand there's back in the day, there was a lot of devotion towards Ronald Reagan, but it wasn't so over the top. Um, and now it's almost like North Korea or something. He's going to have the greatest crop ever, he is the has solved everything for humankind, and which he's done none of that. But there's just all of this kind of whatever he says goes, and I don't understand that willingness to just kind of sacrifice everything for him.
I've given this a lot of thought, and particularly with regard to the evangelicals, and the thing that keeps coming back to my mind is that as teeny tiny children in the evangelical church, we are taught not to ask questions and not to question authority. And we are also taught, that everything has a reason and God has a purpose for everything and God's will reigns. And so I think a lot of these people think, well, it's God's will that he's there. That bullet missed him and God knows what he's doing. And who am I to ask questions? And I think, the evangelical church, certainly the Southern Baptists, aren't so different from the Catholic Church with regard to their power structures, their authority structures. And these mega churches, even though they aren't necessarily one of those denominations, the pastors of these mega churches have massive power. And so there's not a lot of pushback. People aren't really taught to question or push back. They're taught to get in line. And so it's natural for them to get in line and to say, well, this is God's will. This is what is happening. So I'm going to be on board with it. This is the right thing. And we have systematically told them every single Sunday for 30 years that Republicans are Christians and Democrats are not. That's what we've been trying to teach them this whole time. And remember, people like three things. They like things to be simple. They like things to be certain. And I like things to be positive. And I mean positive insofar as I can fix this, right? Not positive into things are good. So if you think about that and you think about the reality TV world that we live in now, they don't want to know how to build the clock. They want to know what time it is. They want to know who to blame for their problems. They want somebody that's very sure of himself and doesn't have any questions. And they want somebody that says they can fix it. And he is all those things. And so if you grow up listening to your pastor or following in the steps of any movement, it's no different, really. I mean, it is culty. People talk about that, but the church can be that way too, depending on what denomination you're in. And I mean, all we have to do is dig 2 inches deep into the Southern Baptist Church or the Catholic Church to see the scandal that arises from unchecked power. It's everywhere. And so when you really think about it, it's no surprise at all that a group of people that are taught to not think for themselves and to not ask questions are blindly following somebody who tells them that God has chosen him and that he knows the way.
What do you think is going to be is the effect that this is having on American evangelicalism? We've probably been talking about this for now since he stepped on the scene. And when people think of Christianity, in most ways, that's what they think of is evangelicalism. So whatever happens in that part of Christianity really affects Christianity as a whole, and in some ways. So what do you see as the kind of the effect of all of this devotion towards President Trump? What is this having on evangelicalism, but what do you think it's going to have on Christianity in America as a whole?
That's a great question. I think, evangelicals by nature evangelize, right? And the problem is we've stopped evangelizing. They have stopped evangelizing for Christ and have started evangelizing for Trump. And it's silly. You kind of want to laugh at it and be like, no, they don't, but they kind of do. I actually I have a niece who asked me, I was home for a wedding a couple of years ago. It was I guess it was right after 2020, after Biden had been elected. And I guess my sister had told her that I voted for Joe Biden. So she came up to me and she's like, so are you not a Christian anymore? And I go, I'm like, honey, what? And she's like, well, you voted for Biden, right? And I go, yes, I did. And she said, why? And I said, because he's a good man and Donald Trump's a bad man. And you should know that. Just because he's a Republican doesn't make him a good man. And I just thought, wow, like, wow. And to me, it's a little story, but it spoke volumes insofar as what people really think about people who leave the Republican Party, and certainly people like myself that gave my whole career to the Republican Party. And I've gotten that a lot. I've got a lot of cousins of people sending me texts saying, I'm praying for you, like I've lost my way, and because I'm not a Trumper. So the way this is intertwined is A, no accident. It's masterful. B, we've been working on it for 40 years, 30 years. And it's disgraceful. And there's a reason that fewer and fewer young people want to go to church, and yes, you have pockets, you can see articles, you have pockets where the church is growing, but those are the same pockets where the young people are also flocking to Donald Trump. Red states, prosperity churches, place where they're saying, if you come here, God's going to make you healthy, wealthy, and wise. All that stuff, that snake oil stuff, that's all. I mean, I grew up 5 miles from Oral Roberts University. I know that drill, right? I know the whole give me money or the Lord's going to call me home on Sunday. Like that is nothing new. But the only places where churches are growing are the places where Trumpism is growing. And other people, other young people, and middle-aged people are running away from the church because they see that the gross hypocrisy. I'm like, how can you preach? This church has nothing to do with Jesus Christ. There's a lot of people who really love Jesus Christ who don't want anything to do with the church. Mm-hmm. For good reason. How could you blame them in this climate? You talk about, you call people S-hole countries and talk about the poor and talk about women and talk about Black people and brown people and people from South America. I mean, everything out of their mouth is disparaging another human being. There's nothing Christ-like about it. And I don't know in what universe a person that didn't want to come to church in this climate, that hadn't had a previous church experience would want to come in under these auspices. If they see Mike Johnson stand up there, the Speaker of the House, and say, if you want to know how I'll lead, just look at the Bible. And then you look at all the disgraceful things he's done and said since. How do you square that circle? I don't know. But I think it's not a surprise that people are not flocking to the church and that church numbers are down.
Kind of dangerous to say you should look at the Bible, because I couldn't look at the Bible and
right.
There's some ways it's not lining up.
Right.
To how he's living.
Right. And also the gall. I mean, the chutzpah to say, I am so biblical. I am such a great Christian that everything. I mean, you're really putting yourself on a high horse there. I mean, you're putting yourself up there to be knocked off. We all make mistakes. We all fall short. That's the whole point of this. And to stand up there in such a sanctimonious, judgmental way and act like everything out of his mouth is straight from the Bible, or, his actions are without reproach, is just, it's a lot. And it's off-putting to people. And especially when the behavior doesn't match the language.
How do you think, I kind of want to talk about the other side of this for a moment, is how are the Democrats responding and how should they be responding? I mean, there's been a lot of talk about the fact that they seem and kind of still trying to figure out what they want to do and how to best be in this changed environment. But, kind of as someone that has worked in the political era, in the political side, how are they doing and what should they be doing?
I mean, I think there's no question that the Democrat, I mean, if you really want to blame somebody for what's going on right now, you can blame Joe Biden and the Democrats for what's going on right now, not because for anything other than missing a layup. I mean, this should never have happened. This phenomenon, he has the slimmest margin of victory since George Bush in 2004. This was he can talk about a mandate all day long. Yes, he won all 7 swing states, but the margin of victory was minuscule. And if not for a series of tactical and terrible errors by the Democratic Party, we wouldn't be in this position. So, first of all, you have a party that allows an 82-year-old man to run for re-election. And I say allows, we all know if you know presidential politics, it's easier said than done to get a Republican to get a sitting president of the United States to decide not to run. That should have been something they were drumming, regularly with him about. You're the transition. This is your legacy. This is the gift that you give. Let's spend a bunch of time figuring out who's going to succeed you. The problem is they get into this. Kamala Harris is not, I voted for her. I liked her. I thought she was, but I didn't think she was a incredibly transformative candidate. I thought they had stronger candidates in the Democratic field that probably would have won or could have won. Joe Biden was not one of those, as much as he likes to say so. And I really have great, deep wells of respect for the man. I think he's a good person. I think he did his best. I think he got us through out of COVID and through a very rocky period of division in this country with avoiding a recession or a depression, which we could have had either one. We came out of COVID quicker and stronger than any other nation on earth financially. And he handed over, regardless of what Trump wants to say, a very strong economy. I know it wasn't strong for everybody. I know that there were people hurting. The problem with this is that the language and the emphasis from the Democratic Party, not just on the election, but just writ large, way too much. DEI is a good thing, right? We all want to be diverse. We all want to be equitable, and we all want to include. But when you push something so far that that's all you talk about, then you lose people. That and the bathroom stuff, it's all valid stuff, but it's a thing. It's not the thing. And they made it such an emphasis that they lost the working man. They gave the Republicans a huge opening to say, they don't care about you. What was the Kamala Harris? She cares about they, them. He cares about you. They were wide open to that. And the fact that they didn't know, there's some basic opposition research stuff. If they didn't see it coming that Kamala Harris said that she was in favor of transitioning prisoners for their sexual sex change for prisoners, that is something that you needed to rectify that quickly. You needed to address it and be clear about your position. There were a lot of things I feel like they were just sort of scuttling on and hoping nobody remembered that she said in 2019. So when you have a candidate with those type of issues, those left of center issues, and for prisoners, I think that's left of center by most people's measure. That's going to be like a 90% issue. You're not connecting. They're focusing on 10% issues and they're not focusing on the 90% issues. They should have been talking about inflation and costs and not standing up there saying the economy's strong. Because if people don't feel it, they don't feel it. You have to say, look, the indexes, they're good. We're getting stronger. I know people are hurting, but we're getting stronger, and show them all the time. The other thing that Democrats don't do, like Donald Trump doesn't do, they haven't caught up to the game. Well, I go back to the RNC. When Obama came in, he beat our butts on email. Then it was like email campaigns, like all the online stuff. We were behind the 8 ball. The Republicans had always been better at get out the vote, but Obama turned on the young people and he turned on all of the internet stuff. And it took the Republicans a while to catch on to that. I feel like now Trump has mastered this whole social media in people's face all day, every day. So then you have a Republican, you have a president that comes in like Joe Biden, who's just a normal president who presidents the way that presidents do, which means they do their job and they're not yelling at you in capital letters all day long on their made up platform. We're not used to that. So people thought, well, he's not doing anything. He's Weekend at Bernie's. He's dead in the basement. There's a shadow presidency. No, he's just being a normal president, but we don't remember what normal is now because we've had somebody screaming in our face for the last 9 years. So that's what people, sadly, they expect. They like the spectacle. They like the capital letters. I don't know if they like it, but they expect it and they feel like somebody's doing something. And so the Democrats didn't do a very good job of beating their own chest and saying, hey, look what we've done. And, if you watch TV for 30 minutes, you'll see two ads. Trump is still in campaign mode. He never leaves campaign mode. He's out there telling everybody what he's doing, whether it's true or not, doesn't matter. That's not what we have ever had in the American presidency, but it's what we have now. And the Democrats are going to have to adjust their game because that is what the expectation is by when I say uninformed electorate, I mean the casual observer. I don't mean that in a disparaging way. But people who don't live and breathe politics don't pick up on all that stuff. But they do see the ads and they do see, whatever makes the news, and Trump knows how to make the news. So it looks like he is doing a lot, sadly now. But for 4 years, he never shut up. When he was out of the office, we've also never had a president who spent 4 years every day, all day, running down the job that the current president was doing. We've had a long-standing tradition in this country of when you step off the stage, you let the next guy lead. And you pretty much keep your mouth shut except for extreme circumstances. Trump was an extreme circumstance, and there were a couple of times, very few, that Obama said one thing or very, minimal thing. I don't think Bush never did. I don't think Bush ever did. And I don't know that Clinton did, the first time. So it's just, Biden steps into a divided nation and has somebody screaming at him and running down everything he does 24/7 for 4 years, calling him every name in the book, establishing their own set of followers that no matter what the president does, it won't be okay. And it added to the division. Trump was the first president to not care about uniting the country. Biden tried. I do believe he tried. And Trump isn't even trying. Last night, he just gets up and mocks half the room and half the country and ignores the fact that he is still and will forever be under 50%. He has the lowest approval rating of any president ever, except for his own self the first time. So, people wanted him to address inflation and the cost of living and the cost of eggs and groceries and gas and housing. He's doing none of those things. And what does he talk? Who does he bring last night? He brings somebody whose child was murdered by an immigrant. We're going to disparage immigrants, and I'm not to take away from that tragedy. It's horrible, but he has ridden the backs of Lake and Riley's family for a while now. He's gotten political points out of them for I don't know how many months. So he had her family there. He had a girl who'd been hit in the face by a volleyball that was hit by a trans child that hurt her that she got injured. So those are the people he puts in the box. I mean, we're talking about trans stuff. We're talking about immigrants, trans stuff and immigrants. We're not talking about the fact that prices have gone, through the roof, that the job loss situation is bad. The inflation indices are bad. We've gone I think it's a 2.9% growth to now we're negative 2.8%. So like a 6-point swing in 6 weeks. I mean, that's not good. Nothing's going in the right direction. And the thing is that his followers are so lockstep, they don't feel the heat. It's a very insular world. And because, we're now have such a segmented media, people aren't even operating with the same information. I will get texts from my family in Oklahoma and Texas that are completely it's almost like the talking points are straight from the Republican National Committee but they got it on their, whatever independent news source, but it's stuff about Ukraine and stuff that's just categorically untrue, So the fact, but you can't really, it's hard to blame them because they're getting news from sources that they think are legitimate, but they're not. And I don't know how we get back to we don't all watch the same nightly news anymore. So the lack of continuity with information is a problem that I don't know how we get back to it. But back to the Democrats, they're going to have to learn how to operate better in this social media news, reality TV show world that we live in, because, as distasteful as I find it, it's just the way it is now. And the other thing that's dangerous about it is the people that are reasonable and thoughtful find it distasteful and they check out. And the people that check in are the people who are, issuing death threats to anybody who's not on board with Donald Trump. And so you really can't afford to check out. You just have to take your Pepto-Bismol and watch it and try to get through it, because we've all got to be informed. We need to know what's going on as much as we don't want to.
One of the things that I've noticed recently, there was a story in the Washington Post about a woman, and she was from my home state of Michigan, worked for the Forest Service. And she was not crazy about Trump, but had heard something about the whole IVF thing. And she and her husband, they just were trying to have a child and thought, well, maybe this is, he could do this. So she kind of hesitantly voted in favor of him. And because of all the things that have been happening with Doge and all that, has lost her job and is very angry now at the president. But it was interesting seeing some of the responses to that article, which were not there was not a lot of sympathy towards her.
Yeah.
And I think that I've seen more stories like that of people who may have voted for Trump, and especially worked for the federal government and they've lost their job. And I don't see a whole lot of sympathy. And I guess my question is, for people who are on the other side, how do you try to extend grace to these people? And how do you kind of try to bridge the gap there? Because it seems like kicking a woman down is not really going to help right now. But I also can understand people's anger or frustration as well. But it's like it's taking it out on the wrong person.
I completely agree. I mean, I really have. I struggle, and I've had a couple of friends who are like, well, good. I hope they do. And I'm like, no, you don't. No, you don't. And I'm like, no, they'll back out of it and go, I don't. I think they're just so beside themselves that otherwise good people, and myself included, I mean, I would say in my life, of the people that I love the most, 70% of them probably voted for Donald Trump, just partially because of my region of origin and because of the party that I worked for, for so long. Probably 70%. And I love those people, but I don't get it. And when I look at when somebody's this person is so obviously void of moral character, right? And they go, but the Democrats, but everybody's bad, but, I have to back out and go, okay, they're not living and breathing this. They don't really engage to that degree. They're hearing these promises, whatever these, not realizing, because I guess just not paying attention enough to know that Donald Trump doesn't care about keeping his promises, just the ones that are convenient for him. Mm-hmm. But it's easy for people to fall into this trap of, God, are these people stupid or are they evil? Because it's got to be one or the other. And the fact is they're not. They're neither. And we know this. And as Christians, we know this. And we have to remind ourselves that sometimes, if you have a child and you tell the child not to touch the hot stove, and the child touches the hot stove, do you rejoice when the child burns their hand? No. You just hope they learn from it. And I think that's all we can do is just hope, try to give them grace, try to give them room to turn around. Because if we don't give people room to turn around, you know what they do? They double down. And that's when people get really defensive. And that's when the rifts get really, really deep and wide, because we beat them over the head with their bad choices. It's like if you have a kid who makes a mistake, you don't wake them up every morning and go, remember when you made a mistake? Remember when you screwed that? If you do that, you're not a very good parent, but I hope you're not doing that. But, we don't do that. That doesn't help people. That doesn't help people move forward. It doesn't help them heal. It doesn't help us heal. And, grace it's always the hardest thing to give, right? That's why it's also a hard thing. Sometimes it's the hardest thing to accept, and we have to give that grace, because we're all given grace. And I just think it's hard to not play it's very tempting to play the blame game. And it's very tempting to go, I hope you're happy. I hope that you're really happy with what you did here, because this is a disaster. But I think it is gratifying to know that there are a lot of Trump voters out there, Republicans and Democrats, not so many Democrats, Republicans and independents, that are regretting that vote. And I think that the best thing we can do is to validate it for them and say, you know what? I understand how you made that mistake, because the campaign was poorly run, and there was one side, you wanted to vote for her, but she didn't give you enough good reasons. And I think from a purely mechanical political strategy standpoint, I wouldn't have been able to say that the day after the election. I was mad as a hatter. I was mad about it. But looking back on it, at the mistakes made, you can kind of go, okay, if you're just Joe Schmo in a conservative state, she didn't really have the time to make her case. She had 90 days to not just make her case, but break 2 glass ceilings. Well, I guess we've had a black president, but certainly not a black woman president. So you have those hurdles. And then you also have the other equally big hurdle, maybe not as big as being a woman, but of being a California liberal. And you're running, and, you're needing all these swing states of conservative people to get on board, and to have 90 days to undo some policies that were pretty left of center. That's not enough time. It wasn't going to be enough time no matter what. And I think I was mad at myself for being naive enough to think it was enough time. I thought she was going to win it. And, but I think that the mistake the Democrats made was, he is so bad and so void of character. How could anybody wrap their head around it? That is the mistake. And that's not the average voter's fault. And, a couple days after the election, this friend of mine was like, you're mad at the wrong people. You're mad at the voters, and you need to be mad at the Democrats. And of course, then I got mad at him for saying that, but just for a day or two. But he's right. I mean, it's, you can't be mad at the voters. The voters, they are the jury. They take all the information that's given to them, and all the ways it's given, and the amounts given, and they make their decision based on their snapshot of their life. Like the woman you talked about, who thought maybe she'd get her IVF paid for, or maybe she thought these people, they seize on something, and that one thing is the thing that they hang their hopes on. And it's sad. We can feel bad for those people. We shouldn't be mocking those people. We need to understand how they got there, give them room to turn around, and hopefully, convince them to take another look at the Democrats, have the Democrats convince them to take another look. Because look, I'm not a Democrat. I'm very clear about that. It's just that right now the Democrats are the only ones that can. My team has failed me. They have nominated 3 times in a row a person that has no moral character. And my senators and governors and congressmen that are good people that I know, and they are good people, they are not standing up and stopping this train. They're not stopping him. So evidently the only people that can stop him are the Democrats. So for all intents and purposes, for right now, I'm rooting for the Democrats. I'm rooting for good Democrats to step into the void and stop the madness, because it's bad. It's bad. And it's not just Doge. People are like, oh, I like the cuts, and I like this, and I like that. It doesn't matter. It's not about what he's doing. It's about how he's doing it. And the way that he's doing this is dismantling our system in ways that it's going to be really hard to put back together. It's like a Humpty Dumpty situation. And everyone is, they're risking our long-term health of our country for a very short-term gain. And I don't really understand why. And I don't know that I would love for somebody to explain it to me. I understand the mechanics of winning. I understand how important it is to win. But at the end of the day, some things are more important. And, keeping our national, the whole basis of our Constitution, our national moral code, our attempt to be the world's good guys. That was important. That used to be important to my party. And I think it's still important to most people. I really do. I think we want to be the good guys. We don't want to carry everybody's weight. We don't want to carry everybody's baggage. Should Europe pay more of their own way? Yeah. They're away. Sure. The problem with Trump and what he's doing is if it's a silo, I agree with this much of it. I agree with the bottom 10th, but the rest of it is filled up with just nonsense. And then the means of implementing it is just unconstitutional and illegal. Mm-hmm. And if we allow that for him, then we have to allow that for everyone. And then we don't have a system at all. And that's the way this whole thing crumbles. And I don't understand why my Republican colleagues and friends don't see it that way. I don't know why they can't separate out. Yes, I like that some of these policies, but the way he's doing it is it's going to take us down. It's how democracies crumble. What was it that Benjamin Franklin said? A republic, if you can keep it.
If you can keep it.
You can keep it. And I think that's being tested right now.
Well, this is not going to be the hopeful question, the final or hopeful question that I have here, but is one, we're also doing this on Ash Wednesday. So it's a day of we're talking about penitence and forgiveness and all of that. Where does this fit in to all of that? And because I think sometimes Donald Trump didn't just happen out of nowhere.
Nope.
There were things that led up to it. And I could say 1,000 different things that have led up to it. So what are the things, what are the sins, the things that the shortcomings that you think have led to Donald Trump? And where is the room for repentance to turn around?
So that's you kind of touched on the whole reason for my podcast, which is it's a mea culpa of sorts. I think the way that I raised a lot of money for those guys and certainly believed that the ends justify the means. And I certainly believed that, that back in the day, I believed that our worst guy is better than the Democrats' best. I shouldn't say guy, candidate. Our worst candidate is better than their best, which is laughable. Of course, you're looking through the lens of today. I mean, good grief. But, we employed a lot of Machiavellian tactics. I think the Republicans have always been, with the exception of Bill Clinton. Obama was a master in different ways. But Bill Clinton's ability to really connect with the everyman in ways that was masterful. But aside of him, and then just sort of the swell that Obama had, which was new and a whole different thing, Republicans have always been better at the game. We're just better at the game. I think we're slightly more ruthless. I think we're less idealistic. I think we are able to set our real feelings aside to win. And it was winning at all cost. And, when I first started at the Senate committee years ago, my boss, and he didn't mean it literally. He couldn't say it today, but he would say, all right, let's all go out there and kill some Democrats. Meaning, like the game, but at the same time, we would also play softball with the Democrats after school, after class, after work. We'd play softball with them and we'd have beers with them, and they were our friends, But we meant kill them like kill the other team, which, in today's society, you can't ever say that. But that was even though we were more ruthless and we were more, and we were better at the game, we still didn't hate our opponents. We didn't, not here. But what we did is we fostered that hate out there. So people in Washington, we have best friends on all sides of the aisles. But the way we talk to people back home is we expect them to silo themselves. What do you mean you're friends with a Democrat? You're going to be friends with a Democrat? What? Why? And so all of a sudden you self-select, and your neighborhoods and your churches and your schools are all Republican or all Democrat. Not really, but you start to move in that direction. And that was not an accident. Then you add in the gerrymandering and the whole general birds of a feather situation where people who agree tend to hang out together. Then you've got whole churches and whole networks. It's much easier to mobilize people when they're kind of in a community of some sort. So this has been in the works for a long, long time. I mean, the church voter guides we put out, the Christian Coalition, were, right on the edge of legal, just always skating on the edge of legal. And I thought at the time it was just a good way to get people elected. Back then, I used to say, of course, say that you're for, and I know that I don't know where your politics are on this, but the whole, say that you're for overturning Roe versus Wade. It's never going to get overturned, but say it anyway, say whatever you got to say. Let's get these people on board, and it was shameless. And it was harmful. And we thought we were just winning the next race. We didn't think, when I say we, I'll say I didn't think we were laying a groundwork that would lead straight to Donald Trump, that would lead straight to Mitch McConnell's Machiavellian movements, machinations that kept Obama from getting his last judge, which gave Donald Trump 3 judges, which overturned Roe versus Wade, which is putting gay marriage in question, which is expanding presidential powers, which is possibly given him immunity to commit untold crimes. So, you follow that thread of what you did back in the day, with the voter guide or with the justification. Humans are masters at justifying our actions, rationalizing. And if we do that enough for long enough, then, you can see how the parties change. The hard part for me is knowing that there are so many Republicans who aren't that. They're still Republicans. They don't like it. They don't like Trump. They think he's a pig. They think he's dangerous, but nobody feels empowered to do anything about it. And that loss of power and stripping the United States Senate from their advise and consent role. But he didn't strip them. They just gave it over. Like they haven't stood in the breach at all. They haven't stood in the breach at all. They haven't even tried. And so it's hard. It's really, really, really hard to rationalize that and separate out. This is a good person who has good moral values, who I believe in and I really admire. But they support a despot and a wannabe dictator and somebody who's dangerous and as ungodly as any one man I think I've ever seen in the public square. And so separating those things out is important to do when we're trying to extend grace. I'll own my part in it. I own it. I can't, people are like, don't flog yourself over. I don't beat myself up, but I can't run from it either. I did what I did. I do regret that. But I also think that if we don't try to correct from the inside, from the side that needs the correction, the Democrats can't correct the Republican Party. They can't fix it. Only Republicans that stand up can do it. And they have to have the courage to stand up. And as this president becomes less and less popular, and he will become less and less popular, unfortunately, on the backs of a lot of people that are going to have pain, I'm sorry to say, I think the thing for us to remember in this time of repentance is to offer that grace, is to understand how they got there, and to try to show them another way, and some of that goes along with hoping and trying to help the Democrats reconnect with their voters. Barack Obama and Bill Clinton didn't get elected on the backs of, Starbucks sipping, California liberals, right? It was the everyman in every state. And they've got to find that again. They've got to reconnect. That is their natural constituency. They've just lost a lot of people. And I think they can do it, but I think the first step is that people that voted, that are very anti-Trump, that have always been anti-Trump. And I will also back up and say the first time he was president, I didn't vote for him, but I rooted for him. Like once he got elected, I wanted him to be better than I thought he would be. Mm-hmm. And every president, even if I thought they weren't qualified, had always stepped into that job. They always grow in the job. They always somehow become presidential, somehow. And he didn't. He showed us exactly who he was. And so I'm still rooting for him to make better choices. I'm not seeing, I'm a fool me once kind of person. I don't have any hope or expectation that he will, but I hope he does. I mean, I just said I don't have any hope. I do hope he does. I don't have any expectation that he will. But I think in this time, the best thing we can do is to help people turn around and to not beat them over the head for their decisions and to not, good grief, not take glee in people's pain. Like, what's Christian about that? Then we're just as bad as he is, right?
Mm-hmm.
As we have to help people in their time of need. And I know a lot of people are feeling very, very hurt now. And if they don't feel it now, they're going to feel it soon, because regardless if they would need to buy groceries or build a house or whatever it is they need to do, it's going to hurt.
Yeah, especially as the tariffs are going to kick in.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah.
And, I think the other thing we can do is just, without being punitive about it, remind them, like Justin Trudeau did a couple days ago, of who's responsible for this. Not this is your fault because you voted for Trump, but he lied to you. And you need to know that he is responsible for this. And when he tries to blame Elon Musk, we need to say, no. This is him. He had Elon Musk stand up. He's having Elon Musk take the arrows for it. Just like he tried to blame, if Ukraine goes badly, tried to blame it on Marco Rubio. This isn't a stand-up guy. He's not going to take responsibility for anything. So just to sort of, to be on their side, to be like, look, I get it. It's confusing. I get it. You're not super political, and he lied to you. And I hope that you can, I hope people will give people a chance to turn around and not beat them up, because like I said, the number one thing that people do when you beat them up is they just dig in.
They just dig in.
They just dig in, and then nobody wants to be told they're stupid or that they're bad or they made a terrible mistake. They know it. So just give them room to I can see how that happened, but let's not let that happen again. Let's not let it happen again. And people are like, oh, well, it can't happen again. I'm like, well, it has been introduced already, third term. So like you said earlier, Dennis, it's like there are no limits to what might come down the pike at this point. And I think being clear-eyed about that without falling into despair is our challenge as Christians, and just, concerned citizens, is making sure that we pay attention.
So if people want to know more about you, where can they go? I know you kind of already mentioned your podcast, so this is your time to kind of promote it.
It's called The Mess Is Mine. I'm on Spotify and Apple and wherever you get your podcasts, but it's also a website, www.themessismine.com. And there's a little bit of background about me there. And I guess we're on 5 seasons now. So it's just a little bit of history on a number of things but whenever there's something political that comes up, I thought I was talking myself out of a podcast come last November. I'm like, okay, y'all, we're wrapping this up. And then, things didn't go the way
No, I think you got a few more seasons coming.
So, but it's just, I think the most important thing I want to do with podcasts or in general is just to give Republicans a permission to just think. And it's okay to change your mind. If I can change my mind after my history, where I grew up and what I did for my whole career, if I can turn around on this, anybody can, because I was as dug in as anybody could be. And it's just, it's important. The older I get, the more I realize that I don't know everything. And I don't need to know everything. And uncertainty is kind of the enemy. And I think if we can sort of get people to sort of embrace some of those doubts and questions about whatever it is, whatever it is, it's how your faith gets stronger, in my view. Your faith is stronger when you ask questions, when you think about your doubt. Same thing with the party. If something doesn't feel right, look into it, think on it. Ponder it, maybe there's another way. Maybe neither side is perfect, but maybe we just need to go with the best side, the one that we think has the best moral compass, because that's where I've come down.
All right. Well, Gretchen, thank you so much for taking the time to talk, and I will have you back because there's still a lot to talk about, unfortunately, over the next few years.
Yeah, no kidding.
But this was a really a good time of chatting about what's going on, And I think maybe at the end of this, that there is still some hope, even though it's pretty dark.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, the good thing is we are set up. We've had hard times before. We've had not exactly like this, but we've been through some stuff. And I think we're going to get through it. We're going to get through it. But we got to stick together. It's good to meet you, Dennis.
It was good to meet you too.
Thank you.
Take care.
Okay.
All right.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye. So I really enjoyed that talk with Gretchen. I hope that you did too. And I'm kind of curious to know your thoughts about the episode, and especially if you might be a Republican. How are you feeling about the party these days? Or if you're a former Republican, what do you think were the warning signs? What do you think can change? And where does grace really fit in all of this? I personally think grace does need to fit in more in our politics. I think part of our problem these days is that there is too little grace. But I'd love to know what your thoughts are. So send me an email at churchandmain@substack.com. And as I said, I will include links to Gretchen's podcast, which is The Mess Is Mine, so that you can listen to what she has to say. And I have listened to a few episodes. They are rip-roaring fun, so I think you'll enjoy it. Also, just a reminder, if you want to learn more about this podcast, listen to past episodes, or donate, visit churchandmain.org. You can also go to churchandmain.substack.com to read related articles. You can subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast app, and I hope that you will leave a review that helps others find this podcast. So that's it for this episode of Church and Main. I'm Dennis Sanders, your host. Thanks so much for listening. Take care, Godspeed, and I will see you very soon.